So, well, first of
Appreciate that.
all, thanks a million for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my
Um,
pleasure.
it's not too often. I always like to talk about like coffee at the start, and I suppose it's not too often that a guest comes on that has their own roast of coffee. Um,
Yeah,
but you recently teamed up with Caffeine and Kilos. How did that come about?
man. So I've been friends with the guys of Caffeine and Kilos since before that was even a brand. Back in 2013, I want to say. Actually, I'm looking at the bag right now. It just conveniently happens to be placed here, and they say established 2013. So in 2012, I met Charlie, Danny, and Dean, and they gave me a call one evening. I'll never forget it because it was at the very beginning. I didn't really have many sponsors, and they called me, the three of them. We were on a little group call, and they said, "Hey, we're thinking about putting this brand together. We'd love for you to be an ambassador." And they kind of filled me in on what they were thinking, and I was like, "Man, yeah, that's so cool. I'd love to be a part of that." And obviously, as things unfolded, I got some apparel sponsors and everything. So the relationship went from more of an ambassadorship to just kind of a friendship. I just had
Yeah.
a great relationship with them. I was able to still promote all of the products that didn't conflict with my other sponsors. And then finally we got to a point this year where we were like, hey, this is the perfect way to collab, because they were doing specialty coffee roasts every month. And we had the idea of coming up with the Happy But Thirsty roast. They sent me a bunch of samples. I picked my favorite one, and we got to do some cool branding, and here it is. I'm actually sipping on it right now.
God, you're such a pro. What a plug.
Easy peasy.
I love hearing about guests' coffee memories. So this kind of started off as like a, you know, more curious about a specific coffee that they had somewhere, and then it's kind of morphed into people have kind of, I suppose, taken it up as, oh, well, I was in such and such a place with this person, and this happened, and I
Hmm.
can't remember the coffee at all, but I remember the moment. Is there anything that stands out
Yeah.
for you?
Hmm. Just a memory associated with coffee. I'm trying to think of one of the first ones that comes up. There are a whole bunch of little moments that are like flashing in my mind. I don't know if any one of them is more significant than another. Um, but I actually am relatively new to coffee. I'm 29, as you said before, and I didn't start drinking coffee until I was maybe 24, 25. So, um, and it was
I was the
actually
exact
me.
same.
Yeah, it's interesting,
Yeah.
right? And it might have been the Caffeine and Kilos guys that kind of introduced that to me. But I don't know. I'm always a pretty high energy guy, so I never felt like I needed that boost from
Mm.
caffeine or a pick me up. And that was kind of the reason that I didn't have that relationship with coffee. And then my fiance Joanne was a coffee lover, and so she would make it in the morning, and I would have a cup just to kind of be able to enjoy it with
Mm.
her, more for the experience than the need of the actual product. And eventually just grew fond of the taste and the feeling of holding a warm coffee and interacting with somebody while you're sipping on one. I think for a lot of people, coffee has become more of a lifestyle and experience than it is just a drink.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. You've been on a good few different podcasts, like, Talking Elite, you've been on with Armin, you've done the Training Think Tank, unusually as a guest and a host.
Yeah.
What was it like? I guess it was probably maybe a bit of an artificial environment being the host when Chandler was the guest. But what was it like
Hmm.
being the one like driving the conversation and asking the questions? Was that like daunting or enjoyable?
It was a little bit of both. I mean, I had a great time because at the end of the day, I just reframed it as I'm just having a conversation with
Yeah.
my friend Chandler. I think that perspective shift is helpful for a lot of different things in life. But that was kind of a last minute impromptu. Hey, Max isn't here. Do you want to be the host? And I was thinking, okay, I don't know exactly what that looks like. I've seen it from the other side, but I've never really thought about how it functions
Mm.
on your part. Um, and I did find I don't think that I did a great job, to be honest. When I watched it back, and even right after it was done, I thought, man, I there were these awkward moments when I didn't really know where to steer the conversation, and that might have been because I didn't plan for it. I would imagine that a podcast host does a little bit of planning. They have an idea of how they want the conversation to ebb and flow. Um, I am very interested in starting my own podcast one of these days. It hasn't happened yet, but I definitely need some practice on hosting before that happens.
Yeah, well, if you need some tips, I can put you in touch with someone who probably knows what they're doing.
My man, sounds great.
um, you're
Talking to him right now.
you're incredibly busy, like even away from the competition floor. Like we mentioned there, you've got your own, I suppose, like sponsorship deals, and then you've got your own brands and stuff. You've got like new ventures with people, the coffee that we've talked about. You've got your Evertrain recovery supplement, and you've got your entirely own brand with Happy But Hungry. Um, I'm assuming like competing is obviously the priority. Do those kind of avenues ever like get in the way a little bit? Do they ever like maybe distract a bit, or is that purely kind of off season work that you do and then shelve it when the season starts again?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that I actually had a conversation with my coach, Max, about this morning. I believe, and I'm sure an outside perspective may see it differently, but I believe that during this season, I do a good job of managing those and keeping training and competing as my priority.
Hmm.
And I make sure that that gets my full attention when I'm in it. I make sure that I get it all done. I make sure I do it to the best of my ability, that I'm recovering. And then I'll fill those gaps once those things have been accomplished with taking care of things for my sponsors, creating my own branding stuff. But during the off season, kind of this window that we're in right now, usually just after the games, basically until the Open starts, I do try to take advantage of the training not being as much of a priority. And that shifts a little bit to the background. I mean, I'm still working out and focusing on some specific things, but the other stuff gets a little bit more time and love from me. So there's a handful of projects that I'm involved with right now that are definitely keeping me super busy. And then I'll kind of like squeeze in training. And while I'm in the session, I'm focused, but I maybe will like push the training back because I have this meeting or this phone call. And usually it's the opposite.
And is that when you have a conversation with Max about that kind of stuff, is that Max being like, you better not fucking let yourself get distracted now? I hope this isn't going to become an issue. Or is it like planning out so that, I guess, talking about it now so that that doesn't happen and no arguments arise or no like issues arise further down the line?
Yeah, I think it's more of the latter where we both have the faith and trust in me and him, where when it's game time and I need to make training my priority, I'm going to. That's never a question. I
Mm.
don't think we've had issues in the past where it's like, hey, don't let that happen again. We both understand that now is the time where we're deloading a little bit. So it is okay to focus on some of that other stuff.
Yeah. Um, During lockdown, like, well, lockdown one, I guess, you did.
We're like still like kind of in it, kind of out of it. I
Yeah,
don't
we're
really know.
we're finished our second lockdown pending. I mean, I gotta assume there's gonna be another one in January because people are just gonna
Yeah,
go ape shit
holiday
at Christmas.
travel
Like,
for
um,
sure.
but you did a ton of lives, and you've kind of kept them going since the games finished as well. Like, you're pretty open about yourself, I
Max,
guess, on your. You've got your
sorry.
you're all right. You've got all your social media, and you're an open book really, and you share a lot. I'm kind of curious, is that like a conscious effort to show more of yourself and to be, you know, even like after the games, you put out kind of a recap every day, and it can't be easy when you've just finished an event to take out your phone and be like, right, let's write down everything I feel after that, and then after the event after the whole weekend is over, to be like, right, let's write down everything I'm feeling now and share it with everyone. Like the easy thing to do
Mhm.
there is to just like go quiet for 2 weeks and then just come back and be like, oh, I'm back and here's my training again.
I think it's a little bit of both. When I wrote down my thoughts and feelings, that was a bit more of a personal thing. And I was doing that without any intentions of sharing it. It was actually on the plane on my way from California back to Miami. I just needed to decompress and unload. And so I kind of wrote those event recaps just so I could process it all and get it out of my system. And then there's been this positive feedback loop that over the course of mostly this year, but it's been the few years leading up to it, that I've just gotten a lot of positive feedback from being vulnerable and open and honest with people. And, at first, I think it was kind of scary and people don't want to share themselves that deeply and intimately with other people. But every time that I, for whatever reason, was drawn to do it and took that chance, I got really awesome feedback, whether it was encouragement from people or just people being able to relate and make me feel like I wasn't alone, or the opposite, where my sharing was able to help somebody else realize that they were not alone in this situation. More so that, like, that was the coolest thing for me eventually, was to realize, hey, by sharing this, I've got a big audience now, and I might be able to help people either recognize that they've been through a similar situation and that everybody goes through it, and then maybe share some things that have helped me get through it myself. And so, again, I think at this point, I'm no longer as nervous to be vulnerable because I know that it's going to be well received. It's going to help me, and it's going to hopefully help some other people as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like it's kind of it's it's a knife edge really between being contrived and like or coming across as being contrived and being like um I don't know how to describe, but like a self-help book kind of on Instagram where it's kind of like,
Yeah.
oh, you're just saying what everyone else says. And then there's the other side of it where it's like, whoa, you overshared there and you gave away too much. Like you kind of have to strike a balance of like not sounding
Totally.
like a Hallmark card and also not like being a train wreck on social media, like.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that there are times that I've maybe like fallen a little bit further to one side than the other, but for the most part, it is just genuinely me and what I'm thinking and
Mm.
feeling. And I think when it goes that direction, people sense that. When I have posted something that's maybe like a purposely motivational, there's like a point that I want to get across that I think could be helpful. And one or two times I've probably done it in a way that maybe it was like, I don't like the way that that came out or that I said that. Like, it didn't match the intention there. So it
Yeah.
happens. And hopefully the total sum is
Yeah.
more positive interactions than negative ones from people.
Yeah. Well, speaking of positive, I think when we start talking about your training now, the first thing I wanted to talk about is your attitude. Like okay, this first part is going to make me sound like a total dickhead, but
Bring it.
I originally I've been waiting, I suppose, before talking to you. I've been thinking like the mask is going to slip eventually. Like cracks are going to start to appear. Nobody is that positive. Like there has to be something. Like I remember watching the documentary last year and you were retelling the swim event. And like it makes me laugh every time I think about it because like it was just so ridiculous. I remember pausing it and being like, who the fuck is this guy? Because it was like
Yeah.
you were like, oh, James Newbury like paddled past me. And I just looked at him and was like, God, isn't this awesome? We get to do this. And he just paddled
Yeah.
past. And it was like this Hollywood sounding moment of positivity out on the lake in Madison together. And I was like, oh, come on. Nobody's that positive that someone would
Yeah.
pass them
Yeah.
out in a race and they'd be like, oh, isn't this great? But it's
Yeah.
like, thankfully, I was wrong because, like, say post games this year was when I was expecting like a bit of a crumbling. I was expecting like, because like it must be a difficult year after last year. Um a lot like a long season, there's a lot of shit going on
Hmm.
outside the sport and then within the sport. It was a long summer, it was a long like spring with everything going on.
Totally.
People out back in, everything, all the arguments, all like there was a lot of negativity going on. So I think it would have been very easy to just be like, fuck this after California. So I think first of all, I want to congratulate you on your attitude because it's clearly like it can't be faked. Like that longevity of that positivity, and even like you say, the vulnerability that you show post games in like sharing your frustrations and your annoyances and your grievances and not like you didn't point the finger anywhere else at any point. It was like, I was out thought on this event, I was outworked on this event, I was out strategized on this event, like it was
Hmm.
it was clear that you had taken on board everything that happened and had taken your blows with your chin held high, which is admirable. um I was curious about that positivity. Like, is that an ever present? Has that always been an ever present, or is it something that you've maybe trained up in yourself, like one would a back squat or whatever?
Yeah, man. Thank you for that, by the way. And again, that's like that positive feedback, just having this conversation with you and you pointing out that that positivity is something admirable, all of those times that people have mentioned that to me has just helped it become easier to be more natural. So I think that I don't know what to call that. I always think of it as like a snowball effect, but I think usually that's a negative phrase. But I mean it in a positive way, that it just like started really small and built momentum, and now it just is the way it is. I was definitely influenced by certain people. I don't think it was an always thing. As a kid, I think I was a little bit self-conscious, and even in like high school, college, was trying very hard to fit in and like be cool and like earn my stripes, I think. And then finally I got to the point within the last 4 or 5 years where I felt really comfortable with who Noah is as an athlete, as a person, and I could just be more genuine, and I didn't have to try to be something else other than myself.
Did
And I
something
think that
happen? Did something happen to bring that on, or was it just a kind of
I
a?
don't think so. I mean, I might have gotten lucky in that I found the sport of CrossFit and I fell into being really good and having a career, a successful career so far. So I think like life went a really good direction for me. So I think that helped. It was like, man, I'm like living my dream now out of nowhere. I didn't have the plans to be a professional athlete at all. I started college with the intentions of becoming a strength and conditioning coach or a psychologist. And then all of a sudden my life changed for the better. And I got to become a professional athlete and work out for a living and make money. And like, I don't know, it's just all was so cool, so fast. And so I think that was helpful in the positivity. I would imagine that if my life was a bit more of a struggle, and that's not to say that I haven't had struggles along the way, right? Like it's hard to get myself to the point that I've gotten to. I've had to work really hard, and I've had sessions and days where there was doubt and disappointment and all that stuff. So it's not like it was just easy only. Um, but I think if it was a lot more of like the hard stuff and the grind, and I was working a job that I didn't enjoy, the positivity would be a lot harder to foster. I've just gotten lucky that I've been able to foster this positivity and have it just kind of continually reinforced as I've gone along.
Hmm.
That was kind of a long-winded way of saying it. And there was one thing that I wanted to point out before we move on, is that that can be a fine line too, the positivity thing that I've had to think through. So after the games, I and this is something that in the last year I've really honed in on, is like a perspective shift and choosing what to give my attention to. So if I focused on the negatives and the disappointment, it could have lasted a lot longer, and it could have changed who I was as a person and what my day to day looked like. If I flipped it and I chose to kind of learn from the negatives and focus on the positives, then I'm going to live, for me, a life that I think is more enjoyable. I'm going to be able to get more out of it. I'll be able to kind of continue on this upward trend. But there definitely is a fine line, because if I focused too much on the positives and didn't address any of the negativity and the disappointment and just kind of like pretended like it didn't happen and went on with my life, I think that's disingenuous, because there was disappointment that I felt for sure. And I don't think that it would be beneficial from a learning perspective. You know, if I just like ignored it and wiped it clean and kept doing what I was doing, I probably would end up in the same position next year. But if I can learn from it and try to take the best parts of it to move on and be better next year, then hopefully that's the best way to go.
Yeah. Um.
Sorry for the rant there.
No, I mean my question was equally long, so it's fine. um.
Perfect.
Pre CrossFit, then you were pretty active, so you did like swimming and lacrosse and other stuff as well. Was there a
Mhm.
moment when you started CrossFit that you were like, okay, shit, this is my thing. Like I'm meant to do this. I'm really good at this.
I think so. Yeah, it was almost immediate. And again, I think I'm kind of realizing this theme in our conversation, that feedback from others is big for me. And maybe that's tied into, I'm just kind of like psychologisting myself here. Maybe that's tied into my desire that I used to have for fitting in and wanting to be cool. That like that feedback from other people matters a lot to me. So when I started doing CrossFit, a lot of people that were at the gym that had been members for a while would kind of give me that encouragement. Like, wow, you got to muscle up in your first week. That's crazy. Nobody does that, man. You're really fast. How are you picking? Like, just a lot of that stuff immediately was like, all right, I'm pretty good at this. And a lot of people are telling me I'm good at this. Let me see how far I can take it and where I can go with it.
Yeah. Do you miss regionals? Because I know like you did like consistently really well at regionals.
Oh, yeah. I love regionals, man. Just as an experience in general, regionals is a lot of fun. And then I kind of realized this year, and I guess I always knew, that that style of programming is very much my wheelhouse.
Mm.
And I did this math a little bit, and I hate to, like you said, point the fingers because the blame is only should only be coming to me. I'm working with a mental performance coach now, and she said something about when you point
Oh,
a finger at
four
somebody,
others are
you've got
pointing
three
back.
more pointing back at you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a primary school
Um,
teacher, and I say that a lot to the kids in my class. It's
oh,
like,
nice.
it's like, why'd you do that? And they point at someone else, like three of your fingers are pointing back at yourself.
Yeah, I'd never heard that, but I like it. So not to point the finger here, but I think what kind of happened a little bit this year, and I'm sure that somebody could argue it, stage one of the CrossFit Games was very much your classic CrossFit regional esque type of programming. And I did well. I finished in second place. And so it seemed to me maybe like as the directors of the games, whether it's Castro or whoever else gives them feedback, were planning stage two, they were able to look back and kind of like check off the list. All right, we took care of that type of workout. We
Yeah,
tested those. We don't need to test those again. We'll go to the outdoors, hill runs, all the other stuff that I historically am not quite as good at. And that's maybe one of the reasons why I didn't do as well at the finals of the games this year.
yeah. Sanctions though seem like I know they seem to be dead anyway, but they
Yeah, unfortunately.
they
We'll see
seemed
what
like
happens.
something that be right in your wheelhouse as well. Not maybe not for the programming or maybe not for the that a route of qualifications, but hopefully if what I've heard is true about this kind of off season type thing with the sanctions that have been built up, it's like engagement with fans seems like something that you thrive on as well. I was
Yeah,
at the games last year and I remember every event, no matter what, you were just lapping it up. Like again, that feedback, but that like
yeah,
the engagement with the fans is something that you in general you don't really see that much, especially at those big events where I guess like people are trying to get in the zone and they're trying to focus and trying to think about what they're doing. Whereas you were like, fuck this, this is what I want to do this for. This is why I'm doing it. And you were
totally.
enjoying it in the moment, which I guess is rare to
Yeah.
see. But I suppose like if you were to put onto paper your ideal scenario for next season, are we talking like the old regional style, but then the opportunity for things like Wadapalooza and stuff when you're in, say, this down period?
I think so. I definitely do enjoy interacting with people. I think that's so fun and being able to kind of build a personality and a brand where you can have an impact on people, I think is uh, the cherry on top bonus that we get to competing. And in terms of a season structure, I've always wanted to find a way for us to compete more often. I kind of don't like that it all comes down to one weekend. I don't know, I guess most sports, there is like a championship match or something
Mm.
where it's all determined then. So that's kind of like CrossFit. But
Yeah, you have cup
um,
competitions and stuff as well, though, I suppose, in most sports. Like,
yeah, right. So I don't know. The fact that we could have the opportunity to compete more often and where it counts for everybody, right? Because the way
mm,
that it worked last year was if you qualified through the open, you didn't have to do any sanctioned events. And so somebody like me that enjoys doing sanctioned events, but they could tire you out a little bit. If I qualified through the open and I chose to do 3 sanctioned events for fun because I enjoy them, I may show up to the games a little bit more run down than somebody that
mm.
just qualified through the open and didn't do anything else. So if there's kind of a set structure across the board where everybody has to participate a certain amount of times, that's more than we're used to. I think that would be kind of cool.
Yeah. Um, do you still train 6 hours a day, 5 days a week?
Um, Yeah, probably more or less. During like the down time off season, it's probably not as much. It's maybe like 2 or 3 hours a day, still 5 days a week. But when we're in like real serious training mode, it's definite at like minimum 6 hours because it's 2 to 3 sessions every day, and each session is 2 to 3 hours.
Do you
And then
think that's
obviously that's
is that maintainable long term? Do you think? Obviously, you've done it this far, but like as you say, speaking as someone who's about to turn 32,
mhm.
it doesn't get any easier, Noah.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I've been starting to feel that a little bit more lately as I've aged. And I recognize that at a certain point, I probably will have to change things up and back off a little. Um, and just to clarify as well, I'm sure you know this, but for anybody else listening, that's not 6 hours of
Mm.
metconning
Metcons,
my
yeah.
face off and 300 pounds on my back the whole time. That's 6 hours of being in the gym.
Mm.
Part of that is doing banded ankle distractions and warming up and foam rolling and cooling down, and like that's a combined 6 hours of training. um, but it's still a lot. It's hefty and it adds up for sure. So we're constantly, Max and I, trying to find the proper balance to make sure that it's sustainable.
How important is he? Because one thing that came up when I was talking to Shane Orr, we talked about a Noble documentary he did where he was asked, how much credit do you deserve or how much credit do you take for Tia's success? And he was like, absolutely none. And I was kind of
Mhm.
curious from the athlete's perspective. Obviously, you and Max are very close. You've worked together for a long time. I know you moved to train with him full time before the games uh, last
I
year,
was, I think I was 18, maybe.
18, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so you moved there to train with him. So, like, you've mentioned the trust that you have for him and that he has for you. And obviously, it's reciprocal in that. But I'm just curious if it's, would you see it as 50-50, or do you think you'd be where you are if you didn't have him?
Tough question for sure. I obviously am very much leaning toward he's helped me tremendously. I can guarantee you that. I It's hard to say, like, if I had never found Max, if I was either working on my own or working with another coach, would I still have been able to be as successful as I have been? But if you look at the leaderboard statistically, the last 4 seasons that I've worked with Max, I went from 2016, I think I took 15th place. That was my worst finish ever. And then since teaming up with Max, I took sixth. No, was it fourth? Sixth, fourth, second, fourth, or something like that. I
Yeah.
don't know. I should know exactly off the top of my head. But basically, significantly better than I had ever done every year since I've worked with him. And I think we've just focused on the things that I needed to focus on, and I've gotten a lot better and like filled the gaps. And obviously, we haven't made it all the way. It was pretty close last year. I was almost able to win the CrossFit Games, which is like a huge life goal for both of us, for he and I. And I'm hoping that that's something that we can still achieve together.
And speaking of last year, you wore the leaders t-shirt for a hefty chunk of the weekend. And like all that training and work with Max was bearing fruit, and the workouts, I suppose, were bang in the middle of your wheelhouse as well. And like it just seemed like the kind of stars were aligning.
Mm,
And the new, I know, I read an interview with you before the games where you were kind of saying like, I don't know how this is going to work. It's a lot of people, and like, until we have more information, it's kind of difficult to say or whatever. But it did
yeah.
seem to be working out really well. And I suppose we'll try and avoid the obvious answer of happy but hungry. But finishing in second, did that feel like a major life accomplishment, or did it feel like a missed opportunity after the weekend, or maybe in the couple of weeks that follow? Because I know once adrenaline wears off, there are those kind of, maybe dark is a strong word, but those darker moments where you kind of have too much time to reflect, maybe, and you're not doing what the kind of ramp up before the games is over, and it's kind of like, oh shit, what do I do now? So I was kind of
For sure.
curious, was it like, hell yes, this is fantastic, or shit, like I was this close and I need to do this and this now, moving on?
That was a very conscious decision that I had to make right after the games. I was aware that it could have gone either of those directions.
Hmm.
And I consciously chose, and I want to say forced myself, but I don't know if that's the right word, but I did that same perspective shift that I talked about before. And I chose to focus on, man, you know what? I am so happy that I finally made the podium. That's been a huge goal of mine forever. Address the fact, like, yes, it was incredibly close. Like, that maybe was my best opportunity to have won the games and we just missed it. Shoot, that stinks. But like, the main focus here is, like, you did it. You got on the podium, and let's just ride with that positive momentum and learn from it and just try to do a little bit better next season.
Yeah. Is there any personal highlight that stands out from last year?
Oh man, just literally the whole weekend was so awesome.
Apart from obviously the paddleboard with James, that's like obviously a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah, no, that was cool, and that was genuine too. Like, I'm not kidding, that happened. And
Yeah.
again, that's just like a reinforcement thing, because I had a moment. I've had a couple moments like that before, like Wadapalooza. I remember specifically one year during the swim, I was in the Bay of Miami, my hometown. I was in the lead. I'm swimming. I like looked up. I saw thousands of people, all my neighbors, and I'm getting out of the water, and I was just like, shoot, this is so cool. Like, I was able to process in the moment how awesome it was. And then it like kind of clicked that that was my job, and just had that overwhelming appreciation and gratitude. So I've had a couple moments like that throughout the years. There was a training session in Georgia leading up to the games last year where we were with a huge training think tank crew doing a road bike event through these beautiful hills in Georgia. It was like sun and just green rolling hills. And I was biking my butt off next to Travis Mayer, I think. And I just had that moment. We were being silent and we're just moving our legs. And I was like, dude, how cool is this? Huh? Like, we're training right now for the games. Anyway, I digress, but those
No,
are
I think
real
I think that's
moments.
it's great though, because I think, like, with the benefit of hindsight, a lot of people have those moments, or like reminisce on those moments when their career is over,
Mm,
or when their marriage is over, or when, whatever
yeah,
is finished, they look back and think like, Jesus, why didn't I enjoy that when I had it? Like, like I
yeah,
wasted so much time being, angry at little things or pissed off at something that it was outside of my control or whatever. Whereas
totally.
I think I definitely empathize with that, because I have a lot of, like, they're basically pinch me moments where it's like, this can't be, I can't be
Hmm.
doing what I appear to be doing. Like, there must be something wrong. Like,
Yeah,
I remember sitting beside, and I don't intend this as blowing smoke up your arse or whatever, but I remember sitting beside my wife when you replied to my story, or to my message on Thanksgiving. And there was a genuine moment there of like, oh fuck, what do I do now? Because, like,
nice.
just those
That's
weird
cool.
moments, and I've had a few of them. Like, I enjoy everyone I talk to on the show, and I enjoy all the guests I have. But there's been a few from day one where I was like, shit, if I could talk to this person, like,
That's
that would
cool.
be amazing. So I think I definitely empathize with that, like, where you're kind of like, whoa, this is bizarre that I'm
Yeah.
okay. Like, I'm not paid to do it, like you are, but you know what I
No,
mean?
I know what you mean for sure. Yeah, it's cool. I try to do it as often as I can too. Like you just pointed out with a marriage, right? I'll sometimes be laying in bed in the morning and Joanne's still asleep on my right side, and I've got like my hand on her leg, and then Max jumps up and lays down in between my legs, and I'm just laying in the bed and I'm just overwhelmed. Like, God, I love these two so much and they make me so happy. And here they are just cuddling with me, and like, I just want to feel this as much as I can right now so that I don't neglect it, you know? Um,
I'd be more in the uh Chandler hug and roll kind of thing, like Chandler
yeah.
Bing, not Chandler Smith.
Yeah. Chandler Smith is good at the hug and roll as well.
That's speaking
Um,
from experience.
yes, definitely. His wrestling background. But yeah, man, I think that that your original question that we kind of went off track on was the games and those moments. And I'm happy to admit that there is a bit of an element of luck to competing, that the stars do sometimes align and things go way better for you than others. And last year it was just like event after event, everything just like went really well. I didn't make any huge mistakes. There weren't too many events that I had to like damage control on. Whereas there have been years past, like I think maybe 2018, It felt like the opposite.
Yeah, your
What's
pedal
that?
and all that. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was.
what's that phrase? Murphy's Law, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
anything that can go wrong will. I felt like that last year. It was my pedal. It was no reps that didn't feel like no reps on the muscle up event. It was the handstand walk where I was like 30 seconds in the lead. And then as I was crossing the line, one hand got stuck and I like fell and like everything. Oh, the clean and jerk ladder, I won my heat, but
Oh,
I
but
had
you
gone
went
around
around.
the
Yeah.
bar to get chalk instead of stepping over it. And it was like, come on, man. Like, what else? Bring it. Just, so I've had both. I've had the highs and the lows, and I'm very glad that I have last year to positively reflect on. And yeah, it was all great.
Like this year, obviously, was different for you know an endless list of reasons.
For
Um,
sure.
but like back in January, you finished on the podium in in Wadapalooza. Can you remember your feelings about the season ahead in that moment? Like when you were standing on the podium, do you like do you try and use that as a gauge for how things might go, or do you view, because it's in January and the games is in summer, do you view it as like just not really that much of a litmus test? It's just nice to dip your toe, and it hasn't really kicked in yet.
It's a learning experience, those types of events. And I think that one was a big one for me because I was super fit at the time. I was really excited to compete. And I had like a blow up experience that I've had in the past where it was like, all right, man, you still have to learn how to pace. Like, don't be so silly and naive. And um, I was able to there learn, take some lessons from getting on the podium, but not winning it, and say like, all right, this is what we're going to do in training moving forward so that you don't have some of those same experiences at the CrossFit Games.
Is it hard, like say when you finish second last year at Madison, and then like is it difficult not to get cocky, like not to get overconfident? Because like I know, even like I'm really shit at CrossFit, but there's sometimes where I'd be doing a workout and I'd be thinking, oh, assault bike, great, I love the assault bike, like grand, no
I've,
problem.
I've not heard many people say that before.
And then inevitably I shit the bed and I go out way too hot. And then I'm
Yeah.
like, God, what did I do that for? Like I can't breathe. And then it's like, oh, I went too hard and everyone thinks I went too hard. So I better keep going at the pace I've set off at so that they're wrong and I haven't gone too hard.
Yeah, yeah.
I have. Like,
Isn't it crazy that you can have all those thoughts in the middle of a workout?
oh, while not breathing and your heart is bursting. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah.
But like, is it difficult not to get like, not like lax is the wrong word and overconfident is the wrong word, but like where you kind of maybe take too big of a step because you think, obviously the train of thought isn't, well, I finished second at the game, so I'm going to do this, but like subconsciously maybe, where it's like, I'm at my peak here, I can take a bit of a risk, or I can take a bit of a leap.
You know what has kept that from happening, I think? Matt Frazier. I think Matt is just so good that I haven't won yet. Like, I haven't been at the top, so I haven't been able to take it easy. Like, every year there's been something to still chase. I finished second last year and I never had the thought of like, all right, I accomplished that. I'm as good as it gets. I get to just chill now. It was
Mm.
like, I finished second and these are the areas that Matt still beat me. Let me go dig in and work on those so I can try to finally beat him this year.
This year then, like going online, I guess afforded you to spend the weekend with, you know, Travis and Chandler and the training think tank. It's fucking hard to say. Training
Yeah,
think
TTT.
tank. Um, you were kind of pushing each other, helping each other. Like, how did that weekend compare to, say, the few years in Madison and in Carson? Like, was it a totally different experience? Did you find it like, you know, maybe not as enjoyable because it wasn't as big an event, or did you find it more enjoyable because it was like a close knit group together?
A little bit of both. And the stage one of the games reminded me a little bit of the week before the big CrossFit Games, because before everything kicks off, we have to get to Madison or California a little bit ahead of time. and you usually kind of link up with some of your friends. So specifically 2019, we went out a week ahead of time. There was an Airbnb that Max, Travis, Chandler, and Anthony were all staying in. We hung out that week. We met up for meals. We trained together, did our little like taper workouts, and there was a lot of camaraderie. And then once it was game time, though, everybody kind of drifted off into their own corner, and it got a little bit more serious and focused. This year, during that stage one process, there was more of that camaraderie and intimacy between the athletes. And then it also, we were able to interact with like our families and friends and fans a little bit more than at the CrossFit games, because there at a venue, you finish an event, you have to go back to the warm-up area with everybody. Like, you're very much on the CrossFit Games schedule, and then you try to go back to your hotel room to eat and focus. This year, you finish an event and you're in the gym surrounded by your friends and family, and nobody's telling you have to go to this area or this area. So you could cool down and foam roll or be on the bike standing next to your dad and your fiance. And for that reason, I thought it was pretty cool and special.
Like I kind of look at competitions and I think of, like, in Ireland we have the leaving cert, so it's like your big school exam before you go to college or university or whatever.
Okay.
And I was like terrible in school, and
Hmm.
I used to remember coming out of those exams and everyone would be like, "Oh, what did you put down for like the second part of question two?" And they'd be all talking about it. I'd be thinking, I didn't do that. Like, what are they talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah.
Is it in those moments, say this year, when you've got like the benefit of hindsight because you've just watched Chandler do it, or because you've just watched Travis do it, or maybe just the three of you are chatting about the events before you do them and during you're doing them, is it uh more like, is it an irritant having the benefit of hindsight before you do something, or is it like annoying hearing maybe Chandler say, "Oh, I did this and this, and I think if I was doing it again I'd do this," and you're thinking, "Oh, don't tell me that, I'm just about to go and do it."
Yeah. I think for the most part, it was beneficial for all of us. There were definitely moments, and it happens every time. Like, I can picture regionals every year. Fortunately enough, most of the time I was in the final heat. So there are like two or three heats ahead of you that you're still in the warm up area, or you're in the corral about to take the floor. And then the heat before you is coming off the floor. And the guys walk back and they're like drenched in sweat. Somebody's bleeding. They're like limping back, dragging themselves into that area. And you're just like, oh God, I have to go do that. So sometimes that can be a little bit daunting and intimidating, but I think this year we were able to set it up in a way that was beneficial to us all.
Yeah, I guess you all want each other to succeed. That's the difference, maybe,
Yeah,
where
for sure.
in the games generally, or in regionals, like, I know there's a lot of people talk about, say, mind games of like people claiming they're going to go unbroken, or people like
Mm.
asking each other
Yeah,
leading
yeah.
questions hoping to psych people out. But I suppose the three of you want each other to do well. I mean, obviously you want to do better than the other two, but you still want them to do well as well, so it probably
Definitely.
changes the dynamic a bit.
There was actually a cool moment that we had before the very last event where I was pretty solidly in second place. I think Travis was solidly kind of in the middle of the pack, and then Chandler was right there on the verge. And we had a designated order of who was going to go. And we kind of all came together, Travis, Chandler, and myself, and said, hey, look, Chandler, you are right on the verge. Let's set this up in whatever way is going to benefit you the most so that we can push you there into that top five. And so Travis decided to go first so he could kind of give us a little feedback. We could watch him, and then I would go second, and then Chandler would have had the most rest time, the most warm-up time, the ability to watch both of us go and learn from us. And so I thought that was kind of special, where it
Yeah,
was
it's cool.
truly we wanted to set it up for success for all of us.
Yeah, I like watching Chandler in stage one was probably my two highlights of stage one, were him running backwards from the wall. Was it handstand push-ups? And he did this weird kick down backwards run, jump over his
Yeah,
bar, and then
yeah, yeah,
his breakdance exit from his handstand as well. They were like just
yeah.
two, yeah, they really stood out.
He's got those little cool guy moments that just happen naturally. He's just a
Yeah,
cool
yeah,
guy.
yeah. The dick. After stage one, then you're confirmed to go back to California. Like, the feeling there, is it, like, finishing the top five is an amazing feat, um, especially given the other people who missed out. Um, but like looking at the point difference when you see, you finish second and then you see Matt and the gap in in each individual event and in the score total, like is it hard not to arrive in California thinking, right, so which of the four of us is going to finish second?
That has been difficult to deal with basically the last 5 years, for 3 or 4 really, because the first year that he won, we didn't really know that he was going to be as dominant
Mm,
he as he was going to be. So the last couple years though, I've had to battle that, like, man, he's so good. Do I discount myself, or do I let that encourage me to work harder? And I think it felt like before this year, after stage one, looking at that point spread, I tried to create a mindset for myself that was realistic but hopeful, where, all right, he's so good, it's going to take everything you've got to beat him. But rather than that being discouraging, I tried to focus on the fact that anything can happen. The events could line up and be awesome for me. I can just have an amazing weekend. He could mess up a couple times, God forbid, get hurt. Like, you never know what's going to happen. So to already start planning and predicting the finish of an event before it happens is, I think, kind of pointless. So
mm.
I felt like I was in a good enough place where I just had myself realistic but hopeful.
I guess you've got nothing to lose because it's different for him, who's
I
like we
agree.
talked about, it's that weight of expectation where everyone expects him to win. Every year it seems like Castro has a dig at him saying that he's past it and that he's past his best. So
I
like
think that's a publicity thing,
oh, it
but whatever.
absolutely is.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
I think he has a lot of that kind of noise going on a lot of the time, and I know he's very good at shutting himself away from it and stuff. But like he's the one who has everything to do, and like he's the
Totally.
one that's at risk of people saying, "Ah, he lost it. I knew it wouldn't last forever, whatever." Whereas like the rest, the rest of the men in the men's side, and now I guess the rest of the women in the women's side, other than Tia, if like if they can push it close, it's an achievement. If they
For
can,
sure.
win, it's a phenomenal achievement.
Huge.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. You can't lose, basically,
yeah, yeah.
unless you finish in fourth like I did, and then you lose.
Well, fifth is worse than fourth.
Yeah, true.
Well,
Sorry, Jeff.
there's people that sat at home while you were in California, so you know.
Yeah, that is true. That was like, again, choosing to shift your perspective in a certain direction. I thought that a couple times. I was like, well, at least I had the opportunity to go and compete. So
Yeah, what's that?
thankful for that.
Last place is at home on the couch. So if once you move, you're not in last place. So I was on at
Yeah.
home on the couch, so I was in last place.
I'm sure you had a great time though.
Yeah, I did. Um, what was your least favorite event in California?
Hmm. Least favorite. The most painful, hands down, like in the moment, intense pain was the swim bike event. Surprisingly so for me. Um, but man, there was a moment there on round three where we finished the 15 cal bike sprint right after having just done another 15 cal sprint, and I jumped in the pool and I panicked and I was like, I'm not going to make it to the other side. And I'm a pretty good swimmer, so that
Yeah,
was kind of a scary moment. But
yeah. You
that one
fell
hurt the most.
across your name
Yeah,
hoarding or whatever it
yeah,
was
I
at the end.
tumbled.
Like you were,
I was rocked
yeah.
for sure. And that was kind of like, that was disappointing too, because going into that event, I was so excited for a swim. I was like, all right, I'm going to knock this out of the park. And it ended up not really being the
See, yeah,
case
the
because of
thing
the way
about
it was
that though, like
structured.
the swim nearly became an inconvenience. Like it was, like I
Yeah,
said, the beauty of the assault bike, or the worst thing about it or whatever, is that like in general you don't feel the effects of it until, if it's a sprint, like you don't feel the effects until about 20 seconds later, because you're
right.
like, man, I'm invincible, I feel amazing, and then you're halfway through the swim and you're gulping water, wondering like why is your heart about to explode through your chest?
Yeah,
Like, so, yeah, it's a very sneaky one. Like,
for sure. Um, but man, let me just do a quick look back. I think the one that I'm the most like saddened by was event one. I just, the fact that right off the bat I just had this like really disappointing last place finish. I don't even honestly know if I went back, if I could have done anything differently to where I would have been able to do better. But that one bummed me out the most, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, no. And your most enjoyable then? Or was there is it is there a day that stands out as the most enjoyable, or a workout, an event that stands out?
Um, I think that the trail run, believe it or not, was probably my favorite, like proudest moment, because the last time we had done a trail run there at the ranch in 2016, I took close to last place and was many, many, many minutes behind the guy that had taken first. So this year, even though I took third out of only 5 people, third is obviously way better than 38th. And not only that, I was only, I don't know the exact time, but I could still see Matt
Hmm.
basically at a certain point, so he wasn't so far gone. And I had a little battle with Jeff the whole way that I was able to win out. So I felt really proud of the fact that I had trained some of that stuff and it paid off.
Hmm. After the game's over, like I kind of, when we were watching the coverage, you spent like a fair chunk of time after Atalanta off to one side. Uh, Before that, you had crossed the line and petted Castro's dog, which, I mean, fair play, because I don't think I'd have been able to identify a canine after doing that event. But you had the
Just like,
wherewithal to stop and pet him, so I mean that
yeah.
was incredible. But like, with watching you spend that time, I guess, like on the side of the hill, kind of lying down, and you're sitting on your own for a while. um, you just seemed like was that weekend maybe more draining than other weekends because of, I guess, you had that weight of expectation, and maybe you felt, rightly or wrongly, that you didn't live up to the expectation that you had for yourself, or maybe that you thought other people had. Like, you seemed fully empty when you were sitting down. Like, was it worse or just different?
Yeah, I think that I was empty is a good word, physically and emotionally, for many reasons. One of the major reasons, I'm going to go back to the specifics, but one of the overwhelming feelings was that 2020 was over, kind of.
Yeah.
It's interesting that throughout this whole year, as things have just gone worse and worse around the world, everybody has been so quick to say, like, oh, I'm over 2020. 2020 is done. Like, can't wait for 2021. And I felt the whole time, all year, I was like, no, wait. Like, I still want to make the most of this year. Like, we still have a season. We're still going to have a game. So I was holding on to it. And then when I crossed that finish line, it was officially over for me. Not just this long, crazy season, but this year of everything felt like just this cathartic release of, like, all right, I can finally let go of 2020. So that was kind of in the moment. But then more specifically, during that Atalanta event, I recognized that, hey, I actually could get on the podium right now, and I had the chance. And I think I was just so crushed that it was so close that I wasn't able to win that event right there on that final mile, and that I crossed the finish line, and it wasn't enough, and it was over at that point. Like, my chances were done, and there was no chance of getting on the podium again this year. So it was just kind of, I just needed to be alone. I'm not a big crier, um, but I would imagine that if I was a crying kind of guy, that I would have been laying on that hill sobbing, just like releasing everything. But I think it was, even though tears didn't come out, it was kind of that, just like, oh man, I don't know, soaking it all in and letting it all go at the exact same time.
Yeah, no, I understand that. 2021 then, like, what are your hopes, and I guess more specifically, what do you plan on changing, or how do you plan on aiming yourself in that direction?
I hope that the world has a better year. I think everybody, I don't know if deserves it is the right word, but needs it for sure. So that's my main hope. Specific to CrossFit and our season and myself, I hope that we can make it happen. I hope that it's possible to put together a season. Who knows if we'll be able to have the in-person stuff the way everything is still looking. It's so up in the air at this point. I've heard on the down low that the Open might get pushed back even further from the date that it's set for right now. So
Oh, is that
I don't
because
know.
like you can't, you mightn't be able to be in your box basically?
I think so. Yeah, I believe that. I heard that like through the grapevine, and I would imagine because if we do have more places go into lockdown after the new year, that people won't be able to participate in the Open because they won't have the gym.
Hmm.
So I don't know if that does happen. I hope that we can just do what we did last year and roll with the punches and make something happen and make the most of it. And I'll just be here ready to rock and roll, and again just go with the flow, I think, is the best way to put it. If you get so stuck in your expectations and hopes for it to unfold in one way and then it happens a completely different way, it's really hard to get yourself to go with that flow. But if you're a little bit more open-minded and willing to do do it however it happens, then I think that that usually leads to the best result.
Yeah. Speaking of being stuck or things being stuck in their way, you were one of the first to proclaim yourself as out. Was it like difficult to come back from that? Was it difficult to take a step back, or were you so reassured by what you saw and the actions that you saw being taken? And especially, I guess, since Eric has come in, I spoke to Chase and Bill for an upcoming episode, and the three of us were just like, I think personally, the thing that most impressed me about the stuff that's being said and the stuff that's being set in motion is that there's this constant reminder of like, we might still fuck it up, like we might still get stuff wrong, but like we all know what we're aiming towards, and we won't get there for 2021, but hopefully beyond that we will. I was kind of curious of if you think there's enough being done now, or if you think that it's a good start, but there's a hell of a lot more to do.
I love that honesty, first of all. I love when people admit, like, hey, I don't know it all, rather than putting on a front as if they do and that they're going to be able to come in and fix it right away. Because if you do that and then it doesn't happen,
Yeah.
it looks way worse. But if you don't make it happen, or I'm sorry, if you do make it happen and you said you were going to, it's great, but people are kind of like, I don't know, you could be rubbed the wrong way. It reminds me so much of physical therapists. There's somebody that I used to see that would always, without a scan, you can't really tell exactly what's going on in somebody's body. And this guy would like lift your arm up and be like, yep, it's a rotator cuff tear of the C351. And you're like, how do you know that? Rather than just being like, yeah, it feels like it might be this, and we could do that. I don't know why I went on that tangent to say, but anyway, that I've always respected the people that have said, hey, I'm not entirely sure. I think it's this, and I'm going to try to help and figure it out. But yeah, it's not all the way there. So I think the fact that Eric has been honest about that makes me hopeful that that we will. And that's my main feeling, is choosing to be hopeful. I think kind of a combination of what you said. I think there has been some great stuff that they've done so far that I got really excited about right off the bat, which they needed to do, right? They needed to come in strong and say, this is what we're going to do to be different. And they did. And then there's obviously been a little bit of downtime, right? The games happen and more things have unfolded, and they're like moving headquarters. So it does almost feel like we're waiting around like, all right, guys, what's next? What are we going to keep doing to like build this positive momentum? And in the meantime, I'm just hopeful that with good people in the lead, that they are in the background planning this awesome CrossFit of the future. So I believe that under their leadership, it can be better than ever. And hopefully with the community behind them, we can make it that way.
Hmm. We'll finish on a quick fire.
Ooh,
So
hit me.
either or, row or ski,
Ski.
bike or run,
Run.
cardio or gymnastics,
Gymnastics.
clean or snatch.
It used to be snatch for me all the time, but that's felt a little off, and my clean has been kind of on lately. So currently, I'm going to go with clean.
And then I've heard you talk about how you're not ready for team, that it wouldn't fulfill your ambitions at the minute.
Mm-hmm.
If right now you were told, right, individual is finished. Who are you picking for your team? What other guy
Ooh,
and two girls would you pick?
that's exciting. Chandler Smith for sure. He's just such a good friend of mine, and he's such a freak athlete that I think it would be really fun and successful to compete on a team with him.
He'd probably do the worm on his
Um,
own as well.
I think that's possible for sure. And girls, I feel like Sarah would be a really cool girl to team up with. Sigmund's daughter, obviously. She's just a beast. She's got an awesome personality. She and I get along really well. So I think it'd be fun to team up with Sarah. And then final girl, um, I don't know. I'm kind of torn between saying Brooke Wells because she's also a friend of mine, and I think she's an awesome athlete. And Cara Webb, Saunders at this point. Cara is also just an awesome athlete and person. So
She'd
that
probably do
could
the
be the
worm on her
dream
own
team
as
right
well.
there. She could handle that for sure. So me and Sarah and Chandler and Cara.
Yeah,
Let's go with
you
that
and Sarah could probably
squad.
sit down for a while, and just let the two of
Yeah,
them
let
take
let
over.
them do their thing for sure.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Um,
Dream come true.
you mentioned Brooke there. I was curious. What did you think of her joining up with Tia, Matt, and Shane?
Yeah, really interesting. Unexpected. I found out I think yesterday or the day before, and it was one of those like moments that I think it could be really good for her. It's interesting though, obviously, because Tia and Brooke are direct competitors, but I think it's obviously great for Shane and Tia and their brand and building Proven into like a legit thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
hopefully it works out well for everybody.
Yeah, I think it like my first thought was same as that. I was like, God, that's weird, the two of them. But then I guess, like no different than you and Chandler. Like it's just kind of you
That
can
was my exact same thought as
yeah,
well. That's how I justified it. I was like, yeah, we were talking about training together for most of this next season, so wouldn't be much different.
yeah. I think it does that definitely adds an air of legitimacy to Shane because I'm sure he's confident himself, but I'm sure a lot of people say, "Oh, it's easy when you've got Matt and Tia." So I guess it'll
This will be a good challenge.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, listen, thanks a million, Noah. This has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I think having spoken to you, I can confirm I don't think anyone could maintain that air of positivity as much as you do as an act. So, it's admirable. Um,
Real deal, baby. Thank you.
yeah, and best of luck for next year. I hope whatever happens, you enjoy the year and you can look back on it with similar memories of those pinch me moments that you seem to enjoy and some more positive feedback for yourself.
Yeah. Thank you, my brother. Same to you. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate you.